Greetings and salutations. This is Miko bringing to you an audio version, the spoken word, of my weekly column on Macedonian matters. The English version is published on Medium.com, and the Macedonian version is published on Svest.mk. This week's column, which is published on Monday, February 11, 2019, is titled, A Preview of Coming Attractions in Macedonia. At some point in the next few days, the government of the Republic of Macedonia will inform the United Nations that it has a, quote, new name. Per the so-called Prespa Agreement, Article 1.6b, the government of the Republic of Macedonia shall, quote, notify all member states of the United Nations of the entry into force of this agreement, and shall request them to adopt and use the name and terminologies referred to in Article 1.3 of this agreement for all usages and purposes, including in all their bilateral relations and communications, unquote. Furthermore, and this is important, per Article 8 and Article 9, Macedonia is obliged to use that new name both, quote, domestically, Article 8, and, quote, internally, Article 9. Now, a good lawyer will tell you that there's a great deal of ambiguity here. The agreement refers to using the name internally and domestically, and as it relates to the government, and all that government touches another subject entirely, in all, quote, official documentation, correspondence, and relevant materials, unquote. What the agreement does not refer to is oral communication, in other words, the spoken word. This is the first of many ambiguities. Now, let me take that first ambiguity and apply it to the upcoming presidential elections in Macedonia. We all know that the candidate from Svest.mk, whoever he or she is, will be campaigning all over Macedonia and talking about Macedonia or the Republic of Macedonia and how he or she loves Macedonia and is fighting for Macedonia. Likewise, campaign materials, signs, billboards, social media posts, websites, etc., anything that bears the candidate's name will be emblazoned with Macedonia or the Republic of Macedonia on them. As for the candidate from Citizen or DUI or the Alliance of Albanians or BESA, what will their candidate say and write? For that matter, how will the government of Macedonia react to all this? How will the government of Greece react? Will the Greeks demand that the presidential candidates say and write the new name? If so, that would constitute an unprecedented interference in a neighboring country's domestic affairs. But isn't that what the Prespa Agreement is all about? What are not ambiguous are the physical changes the government of Macedonia is required to make, and as the government of Macedonia makes physical changes per the so-called Prespa Agreement, especially with road signs, signs on buildings, and other changes that are in the public space, the public will rebel, especially in the more rural parts of Macedonia. Expect sales of paint to increase, and expect vandalism of these things to increase. Here in America, we like to use shotguns on rural road signs. The public, ordinary citizens from all political parties, will not like this. Likewise, when the government starts putting up little signs or plaques, for instance on the warrior on a horse on the square in Skopje, stating that this represents, quote, Hellenic culture and history, unquote, or some such nonsense, well, good luck in keeping that little sign free of paint or vandalism. It will, of course, be more difficult for citizens to battle other changes, as government institutions change their names, government stationery and letterhead, websites, social media profiles and handles, etc. But then when the next wave of physical changes comes, passports, ID cards, license plates, postage stamps, banknotes, and coins, etc., then there will be another wave of protest, anger, and outright rebellion. And we don't yet know what form that will take. Next, in our preview of coming attractions, we will likely see relationships between ordinary citizens of Macedonia and Greece deteriorate. Since it is impossible for a forced agreement on both the Macedonians and the Greeks to produce anything resembling, quote, reconciliation, which can only be achieved by individuals seeking forgiveness and restoration, we will see anger increase on both sides and within both sides. In fact, we've already seen it with the stark divisions among and between Macedonians and among and between Greeks. With respect to Macedonians, the so-called Prespa Agreement allows the Macedonian government to go after anyone propagating so-called, quote, unquote, hate speech, which is impossible to objectively define. The Greeks will encourage this and will put pressure on the Macedonian government, if it wants to continue pursuing EU membership, to crack down on any individual, association, business, or groups that it deems is practicing so-called hate speech, hostile activities, actions, or propaganda, activities likely to incite chauvinism, hostility, irredentism, and revisionism against Greece. All of those things are in quotation marks in the written version of this and spelled out in the Prespa Agreement as being forbidden. This is not a recipe for peace and is in fact a recipe for further division. Next in my preview of coming attractions starts with something that has already been happening, but because the government of Zoran Zaev is neither honest or transparent, we really don't know what exactly is happening. Macedonia is obligated under the so-called Good Neighborly Relations Agreement with Bulgaria and the so-called Prespa Agreement with Greece to negotiate away its history in schoolbooks, textbooks, maps, atlases, teaching guides, etc. Both Bulgaria and Greece have plenty of upcoming opportunities to wring these concessions for the next many years if this or a future government of Macedonia wants to enter the EU. And so, in the coming months and years, students, parents, teachers, administrators will see drastic and one-sided changes to what is being taught. Now, my preview of coming attractions can and should extend to businesses, associations, sports groups, and other things, but I'll save that for another time. Now, here is what I think to be the good news in all of this, if you can grasp it and run with it. All of these changes and situations can and should serve to increase Macedonians' pride in their faith, history, culture, heritage, language, and country. It can and should serve to increase the desire of Macedonians to teach their children and grandchildren about Macedonia and its faith, history, culture, heritage, language, and much more at home, after school, on weekends if necessary, if the state fails to do this, intentionally or as a result of the agreements with Bulgaria and Greece. It can and should serve to increase new strides in Macedonian language, art, culture, and it can and should help encourage Macedonians as they turn to the institutions in which their identity is rooted, faith, family, friends, and tradition among others. Finally, if the government of Macedonia refuses to help Macedonians living in the neighboring countries of Greece, Bulgaria, Albania, and around the world, then it is up to the Macedonians living in Macedonia to help their fellow Macedonians living in Greece, Bulgaria, Albania, and around the world preserve their faith, language, heritage, culture, history, and more. The Prespa Agreement robs Macedonia and the Macedonians of both their dignity and their self-esteem. There are consequences to that action. I leave you with two thoughts. First, there are more good things in this life than you can possibly imagine. And number two, the proper attitude is always gratitude. Thanks for listening.